Welcome in, everyone. Let's jump right into today's explainer, where we're going to unpack a super common yet incredibly painful client presentation. We're talking about that deep-seated, exhausting feeling of just never being enough. Today, we're building a clinical case formulation of chronic toxic shame. We'll be using precise psychological terminology to look at exactly what's going on beneath the surface. Everything from early attachment wounds right down to the nervous system's survival responses.
So picture this client in your room. Outwardly, they function perfectly. Actually, they probably overfunction. They show up, they achieve, they might even be the superstar of their peer group. But inwardly, they are completely consumed by this private, highly disciplined self-doubt. You know the type. They'll rewrite a simple 2-sentence email 5 times because they're terrified of sounding foolish. And when someone actually praises them, there's no relief. Instead, they dread it. It feels like a setup, like they're about to be outed as a total fraud. Then, when things finally get quiet at night, their mind just relentlessly loops through every tiny missed detail from the day.
Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, presenting symptoms of chronic shame. Second, diagnosing guilt versus toxic shame. Third, the etiology, focusing on conditional childhood reinforcement. Fourth, neurobiology and confirmation bias. Fifth, identifying protective survival masks. And finally, guiding clients to self-acceptance. Let's get into it.
Section 1. Presenting symptoms of chronic shame, or the clinical hook.
What's really fascinating here is how this specific pathology manifests. It's almost never loud insecurity or chaotic, attention-seeking behavior. Instead, it's a quiet, relentless internal tension where the client feels their fundamental value is entirely conditional. They basically navigate their whole world with this nagging, persistent sense of being slightly behind, slightly flawed, and always slightly at risk.
Moving on to Section 2. Diagnosing guilt versus toxic shame, differentiating the pathology.
Now, for diagnostic clarity, we absolutely have to differentiate the pathology here. The crucial point is this binary core schema shift. Think about it. Guilt says, I did something wrong. It focuses on a temporary behavior. It leaves room for the client to apologize and move forward. But toxic shame? Toxic shame whispers, I am something wrong. It attacks the identity itself. So for a client living with chronic shame, missing a deadline isn't just a simple mistake. No, it becomes this catastrophic, definitive proof of their fundamental inadequacy.
Section 3. Etiology, conditional childhood reinforcement, looking at the origin of the wound.
Let's view this through the lens of attachment theory to see how this insecure attachment actually develops. It's a pretty devastating developmental sequence for a young mind to absorb. First, they grow up in an environment where love and approval are strictly tied to performance. Second, when the kid is easy to manage or bringing home A's, there's warmth. But the exact second they struggle or fall short, that warmth just evaporates. And so, finally, the young mind draws a logical but tragic conclusion. Love isn't something you just inherently receive, it's something you literally have to earn through flawless execution.
And we can't ignore how adult society quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, reinforces this childhood wound. The client steps into a culture that tightly links human worth to productivity, achievements, and job titles. This environment completely hardwires their long-term identity formation. In this system, resting isn't a basic human right, it's a reward you have to earn after proving you've worked hard enough. So the client adapts by just pushing harder and harder, because just being average feels viscerally dangerous to their nervous system. They end up living with this brutal double standard, offering endless grace to others who stumble, but maintaining absolute, ruthless expectations for themselves.
Section 4. Neurobiology and confirmation bias, how we maintain the inner critic.
So neurobiologically speaking, what's happening? Well, at some point, the client's inner critic morphed into a hypervigilant mental surveillance system. Their amygdala is constantly scanning for threats to their worth, and their sympathetic nervous system actually prioritizes familiar pain over the perceived danger of uncertainty. It does this by leaning heavily on confirmation bias, actively searching for and filtering reality to find the exact evidence that supports their pre-existing belief of not being enough. Because, crazy as it sounds, the brain learned that beating yourself up was actually safer than being caught completely off guard by rejection. You can actually see this cognitive filter in real-time action. Just look at how a shame-bound brain processes praise. It's dismissed instantly, right? The client just assumes people are just being polite or don't know the real them. But criticism? Oh, the brain locks onto the tiniest flaw and treats it as absolute, undeniable proof of inadequacy. It's a perfect demonstration of how the brain organizes reality to keep the not enough belief totally intact, all to avoid the shock of surprise rejection.
Section 5.
Identifying protective survival masks, the clinical presentation of defenses.
It's vital we understand that behaviors like perfectionism, procrastination, and overgiving are not character flaws. They are fundamentally psychological survival masks. Perfectionism, that's not about excellence, it's about creating safety. Because if you're flawless, you literally can't be criticized. Procrastination is driven by a deep secret fear. Delaying a task protects the client from actually trying and proving they aren't good enough. And overgiving makes the client a relentless fixer, because being needed feels like a shield against abandonment. Clinically, we help clients identify and release these masks by asking them to just pause when they feel that intense urge to overprepare or overgive, and gently question what fear is driving that behavior. These masks kept a younger version of the client safe for sure, but they are totally exhausting the adult they'd become.
Finally, Section 6. Guiding clients to self-acceptance, making the therapeutic shift. Healing this kind of deep-rooted wound starts quietly, utilizing evidence-based interventions. To start dismantling that harsh inner critic, we might teach 3 specific grounding exercises. First, somatic check-ins to literally locate the physical sensation of shame in the body. Second, the 5-4-3-2-1 sensory technique to bring their heightened nervous system back to the present moment. And third, self-compassion pauses to actively neutralize that internal critic. This facilitates the vital separation. Our job is to help the client decouple their inherent human worth from their daily work, productivity, and achievements. Real healing looks like guiding them to take a rest without feeling immediate guilt, or helping them say no without mentally rehearsing a desperate apology beforehand.
Reaching this shift is a massive clinical milestone in treating deep-seated shame. As practitioners, our whole goal is to help rewrite that internal narrative. We have to move the client away from that exhausting, perpetual performance question of, am I doing enough? And gently guide them along a narrative journey toward the profound, unconditional self-acceptance found in a completely different question. Am I allowed to be here exactly as I am?
Let's wrap up this explainer by grounding ourselves in this absolutely powerful truth. Whether you're in a one-on-one session with adult trauma survivors, or maybe you're structuring a step-by-step shame reduction group workshop where you're actively normalizing patient vulnerability, this is the core realization we are aiming for. You do not have to perform for worthiness, and you absolutely do not have to perpetually chase approval just to feel like you are enough. That is the ultimate goal when we are treating the complex neurobiological and psychological architecture of toxic shame. So before we go, I invite you to just reflect on a small, ordinary moment where you existed without needing to prove your worth, where you just allowed yourself to be. And as current or future clinicians, please remember to extend that exact same grace to yourselves in your own practice. Make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden psychological patterns we navigate every single day. Thanks for learning with me.